Whose blood was that on the edge of our well? The wind whispered the question before I could speak it, and for a moment I thought maybe the land itself had asked. That spring of 1879, the desert held secrets like breath held too long. My name is Loretta Mae Dalton. I was 19, untouched, unkissed, and utterly unprepared for the way the world was about to split open at my feet. I'd grown up at the edge of Belleridge, where even the law rode in slow and left fast. Our home stood past the final telegraph pole just before the ground turned too dry for crops and too wild for maps. It was a place for men who wanted to disappear and women who forgot how to hope. I tried not to forget. I tried to believe in something more. In love, maybe. In mercy. That morning, I was out past the cattle fence gathering wild sage and desert thistle for Ma's old stew recipe. The sun hadn't yet reached its cruelest hour, but it was hot enough to press my bonnet flat to my scalp. That's when I saw them 6 figures moving along the horizon like ghosts made flesh. At first, I thought I was dreaming them. They moved wrong, too slow and too desperate, like puppets cut from their strings. The first woman stumbled and fell. The others followed, collapsing like sunflowers under a drought. Torn dresses, bare feet, skin, like parchment stretched thin over bone. There was blood, dried on their skirts, fresh on their arms, and dark patches I couldn't explain. The last girl, the one with the raven hair and cracked lips, looked straight at me. Her eyes were wild with something beyond fear. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just reached one trembling hand toward me, as if I were the last rope in a world that had let her drown. Something inside me answered. I dropped the basket and ran. By the time I reached them, one had fainted. Another was vomiting into the dust. The youngest, couldn't have been more than 15, was shaking like a leaf in a storm. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that came to me. "You're safe." A lie, but a kind one. Clara was the first to speak. Her voice was sand and splinters. "They're coming. I gave them water. My own blanket. I told Ellemy's brother to bring bandages and keep quiet." He obeyed, but I saw the fear blooming in his eyes like a sickness. Belleridge wasn't a town that welcomed strangers, and it sure as hell didn't protect them. I wanted to go to Reverend Shaw. He'd been the moral spine of this place since I was a baby. But he preached more about punishment than grace. And when I looked at these girls, bloodied, bruised, broken, I knew what he'd say. They're harlots. God's judgment. But God didn't bleed. God didn't shiver in the sun. So instead, I went to him. Jonas Cutter. The man the town forgot. Or maybe he'd made them forget. He once wore a badge of territorial lawman back when that still meant something. Then came the fire. His wife, gone. His home burned to stone and silence. He vanished into the canyon hills, built a cabin no one dared visit, and let the desert bury him. I stood at his door, hands shaking worse than the girl with the fever. First knock, nothing. Second, still silence. The third, something stirred. A scrape of wood. A breath. The door creaked open like it resented the light. Jonas stood there, taller than I remembered from childhood. A rifle rested in one hand, his face half-shadowed beneath a wide hat, and his eyes, Lord, those eyes were the color of cold ash and older than time. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice sounded like someone who'd forgotten how to speak. "There are 6 girls," I said. "They're wounded, and they're being hunted." He didn't blink, just stared like he was waiting for me to blink first. "I didn't. Badges," I added. "The men chasing them wear badges." His jaw tightened, and his grip shifted on the rifle. "That's not my fight." "It wasn't mine either," I whispered until they fell at my feet. For a second, I saw the war behind his eyes, memories clawing up from some grave he'd dug deep. His mouth opened, then closed again. "I can't save them," he said. "You don't have to save them," I said. "Just help them not die today." He looked past me toward the canyon rim where vultures already circled low in the sky. Then his eyes came back to mine and lingered. You're just a girl. I smiled, bitter. So are they. The door swung wider. Not an invitation, a challenge. I stepped inside anyway. Jonas Cutter's cabin wasn't what I expected. For 3 years, folks whispered it was a place haunted by ghosts and guilt, but what I saw when I stepped inside was simpler and sadder. A single bed made too neatly, a stove that still held the faintest trace of last night's smoke, a bookshelf lined with law books so worn they looked like they'd forgotten their own meanings. It smelled like gun oil dust and something lonelier than death. Jonas moved through the space like a man returning to an old skin-hesitant but practiced. He didn't ask me anything more, just knelt by a chest near the stove, pulled out a long canvas sack, and laid it on the table. When he unwrapped it, metal glinted in the dim light. A revolver. A second. A rifle I recognized from childhood parades. Ammunition wrapped in wax paper. It looked like war laid out for supper. You planning on fighting a whole battalion? I asked softly. His eyes didn't lift. Depends how many devils come knocking. He checked each weapon with the ease of a man who hadn't truly forgotten, just refused to remember. When he handed me a leather satchel full of bandages and old salves, I realized he wasn't just preparing for a shootout. He was preparing to save lives again. Bring them here, he said. I ran like the land was on fire. By the time I returned with Clara half draped across my shoulder and the others stumbling behind me, Jonas had cleared the center of the room. The lantern flickered even in daylight, casting amber light over walls that had forgotten what it was to shelter strangers. Clara collapsed the moment we stepped inside. I caught her before her head struck the floor. Put her there, Jonas barked. Blankets. Under her side, not her back, she's bleeding too low. Grace the fever girl was ghost pale, her breath so thin it barely disturbed the hair at her temples. I laid her down beside the stove and unwrapped the makeshift bandage Shed tied around her ribs. Skin like ivory, blood like rust. I felt the sting in my eyes before I realized I was crying. You ever dress a wound? Jonas asked, kneeling beside me. I've stitched pig belly during slaughter, I said. Twice. His mouth almost twitched into a smile. Good enough. We worked without talking, like the air between us was made of glass. His fingers were calloused, but careful. Mine trembled, but I didn't stop. Blood stained our hands, our sleeves, the old floorboards. At one point, his arm brushed mine as we reached for the same compress, and I felt something I didn't have a name for, not yet. When Grace moaned, he whispered to her, voice low and almost tender. It shook me more than gunfire ever could. There was something in this man buried deep that still remembered how to care. Hours passed, though it might have been minutes. The light in the room tilted. Shadows stretched longer, darker. And then I heard it. Hoofbeats. Faint at first, like distant thunder, but steady. Approaching. Jonas stood so fast, the stool behind him toppled. He crossed to the window, pulled back the edge of the ragged curtain, and stared. They're here? Clara whispered from the bed, her voice thready. My breath caught. Who Marshal Briggs? His men? Her eyes flared with something halfway between terror and rage. They'll have their badges out front and their whips behind their backs. Jonas didn't curse, didn't speak. He only loaded the rifle with quiet, deliberate precision. How many? I asked, moving beside him. 7, maybe 8. Riding hard. No fear in their posture means they've done this before. What do we do? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me. Really looked. I don't know what he saw, some green farm girl with a backbone just beginning to form maybe. But I saw him. Not the outlaw the town feared. Not the ghost of some lawman long gone. I saw a man trying to climb out of the grave he'd dug with his own hands. We stand, he said finally. Or we bury the innocent again. Behind me, Clara pushed herself up, pain etched in every breath. We've been running since Kansas, she said, through 2 territories and a dozen broken promises. But I'd rather die here with someone who fought than live as someone's property. Her words lit something inside me, something fierce and familiar. I turned back to Jonas. Then we fight. He nodded once, Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. Dust rose in the horizon like smoke. Sunlight hit the badge on the lead rider's chest and turned it into a flare of cruel authority. Jonas stepped to the door, rifle in hand, shoulders squared. I followed him, placing myself beside the threshold, feeling the earth tilt as the past prepared to meet the present. And in the hush before violence, I thought I heard it again. That same question, whose blood was that on the edge of our well? We were about to find out. They came like a curse summoned by silence, 7 riders breaking through the afternoon haze, their coats snapping in the wind, their badges catching sunlight like blades. I counted them one by one, my fingers clenched white on the cabin windowsill. Behind the lead horse rode the man who'd haunted Clara's fevered whispers. Marshal Alton Briggs. He sat straight-backed on a black stallion vest, dark as coal boots polished like a coffin lid. His presence didn't just radiate authority, it perverted it. That badge on his chest wasn't justice. It was ownership. Clara's breath hitched behind me. "That's him," she said softly. "He calls it collection. Like we're cattle." Jonas pulled the curtain shut. "They're splitting. 3 heading round back." His jaw set like it had fused to stone. "They're not just here to ask questions. They're here to clean up loose ends." He turned to me then. "Not as a man speaks to a girl, but as one soldier would to another. You ready?" My mouth was dry. I wasn't ready. Not for guns, not for blood, not for what had become by nightfall. But I nodded. Yes. He opened a floorboard and pulled out a second rifle, long-barreled and cold as iron winter. The women gathered closer to the walls. I wrapped a damp cloth around Grace's mouth and moved her gently behind the stove. She stirred weakly. "You've got to live," I whispered to her. "One of us has to tell this story." Then the knock came. No, not a knock. It was the back of a gloved fist slamming against the door like it owed him something. Afternoon Briggs called, cheerful as a snake in shade. "Marshal Alton Briggs. We're chasing after some indentured folks who ran off mid-contract. 6 women, stolen property. Last seen in these parts." Jonas stepped close to the door, but didn't open it. "Ain't seen anyone come through. Not much traffic out this way." "Well now," Briggs drawled. "Mind if we have a look around, just to be sure?" "This is private land," Jonas said. "You ain't got a warrant, and I didn't invite company." A beat of silence. I imagined the marshal leaning forward in his saddle, smile tightening. "Law trumps courtesy, friend," he said, "unless you've got something worth hiding." Inside, Clara gripped the arm of a chair, her knuckles bone white. "Hell burn this cabin down if he has to." Jonas glanced at me once, then quietly unlatched the door and stepped outside. I pressed my ear to the wood. The wind had died, but I could still hear boots scraping dirt. 7 men. 6 heartbeats in here. 1 buried secret coming to the surface. "Well, well," I heard Briggs say. "Jonas Cutter, the ghost of justice himself. What's it been, 3 years since you quit on the world? Since your wife stopped breathing?" Jonas' voice came low and clear. "You're standing where I buried her." A pause. Then, "I'd hate to add to your sorrow." That's when I felt it shift. The air, the ground, everything. I picked up the pistol Jonas had left by the stove. Its weight surprised me, like it knew more about death than I did. Briggs' voice again, colder now. "You really aiming to die for women who don't even belong to you?" And then, Clara, barely able to sit upright, called out from inside. Her voice cracked but defiant. "You already killed his wife, Marshal. What's one more soul to you?" The door exploded open. One of Briggs' men surged through with a shotgun raised. Jonas fired before I even registered the movement. The man crumpled, blood splattering across the threshold. Another figure burst in through the back window, firing wildly. Clara, still lying against the cot, raised the revolver Jonas had given her and shot him square in the chest. He fell backward with a stunned grunt. Gunpowder filled the air like bitter incense. I couldn't hear my own breath. I couldn't hear anything except memory and fire. Jonas moved like a man reborn. Every shot he took struck clean. Every step he made protected someone, but the numbers were wrong. too many boots, too many bullets. Then something glass shattered on the floor. A small vial. Smoke erupted from it, choking acrid chemical. My throat seized. My eyes burned. Grace whimpered somewhere nearby. "Gas," Jonas shouted. "Get them covered!" I dragged Grace behind the pantry door and wrapped both our faces in wet cloths. My vision swam. Outside, the haze shapes moved like nightmares, and then click. Jonas' gun was empty. Briggs stepped through the smoke like he owned it, calm, confident, alive with power. "I always knew you'd fall trying to be a hero again," he said, raising his revolver. Jonas reached for a rifle on the floor. "Too late. I didn't come back to die," Briggs whispered. "But I'm willing if it means you go first." That's when I stepped out of the smoke, face streaked with soot, hands shaking, heart beating like thunder in a barrel. "Then let's see who falls first." I raised the pistol and pulled the trigger. They say the first time you kill a man, it marks you. Like smoke on cloth, you don't see it, but you carry it with you forever. I only remember the way the air changed after the shot. Not the noise, not his body dropping. Just the silence that followed, like the land itself had held its breath. Marshal Briggs fell forward onto the cabin floor, eyes still wide, as if surprised that a girl like me had the strength to end him. My hand was still wrapped around the Colt, trembling, when Jonas pulled it gently from my grip. "You saved me," he said, steady but soft. "You saved everyone in this room." I didn't answer. I couldn't speak. I had never held death in my hands before. But now it knew me. Behind us, the wounded girl Clara's sister groaned in pain. Smoke curled under the doorframe. The flames outside had spread fast, painting the windows with a flickering orange glow. The barn was fully ablaze, its heat searing through the wooden walls. Clara peeked through the back window. "They lit the fences. They're trying to burn us out." I found my voice. "Then we don't wait to be ashes." Jonas nodded. "Creek bed northwest. Stay low. They'll expect us to bolt uphill. This'll give us a chance." "What about the others?" I asked. The women cowered near the hearth, shielding children holding hands. Clara stood tall, eyes gleaming with defiance. "They follow us. All of them. Just like the raids we ran from, they wanted us scattered afraid. Not today." It happened fast. Jonas kicked open the rear door and smoke rushed in like wolves let loose. He tossed me a rifle and shouted, "Move!" The first bullet hit the doorframe. The second missed my shoulder by an inch. We ran through fire, over scorched earth, past the bodies of the horses that never had a chance. 2 riders appeared at the far side of the field. I didn't hesitate. I lifted the rifle, aimed, and fired. 1 man fell. The second raised his pistol. Jonas fired before he could finish the motion. We made it to the gulch. Blood on my boots, soot in my throat. Clara's hands were raw from dragging her sister. At the creek bed, Jonas crouched behind a ridge of stone, scanning the canyon mouth. The others caught up one by one. Women who had bled, who had lost children, who had once begged for mercy now, crouched with guns, rocks, sticks, whatever they could find. "They'll regroup," Jonas muttered. "They lost their dog, but the pack's still hunting." Clara spat into the dust. "We won't make it through another run." Jonas looked at me. His voice dropped low like it was only meant for my ears. "We don't have to outrun them. We just need to bury the road they're on." I stared at him. "What do you mean, there's an old dynamite shack? Miners used it before the gold dried up. Canyon Fork just ahead. If we can lead them in, we can bring the roof down." "And die with them?" Clara asked. "Not if we time it right." Millie, the oldest woman among us, with silver braids and eyes that had watched too many graves being filled, stepped forward. "I've buried too many daughters. If I'm going to die today, I'd rather be standing on my own feet than kneeling in someone else's fire." There was silence. Then I heard myself say it. "Then, let's end this." We climbed fast. The canyon narrowed to a thin neck of red stone and thorn brush. The shack was still there, half buried under earth and time. Jonas and I dug up the cache, pulled out sweating barrels, fuses tangled like snakes. "I don't even know how to do this," I whispered. He met my eyes. "You didn't know how to shoot a man yesterday either." "But you did." We worked by fading light. I could smell the sulfur on my fingers. The sky turned from gold to ash blue. Distant hooves echoed between the rock walls. Clara came to help with the wiring. "You scared?" I nodded. "Good. If you weren't, I'd think you were dead already." She grinned and handed me a matchbox. We set the charges. We waited. Then came the sound. Over 50 riders. Men with fire in their mouths and violence in their eyes. They thought we were broken scattered, but they didn't see the fire growing inside us. I stepped out first, just enough for them to glimpse the silhouette of a girl in a bonnet. They charged. Jonas whispered beside me, "Wait, wait. Now." I struck the match. My hand didn't shake. The fuse hissed like a snake disturbed, and when the mountain roared, when rock fire and thunder swallowed the canyon whole, I felt something inside me give way. Not fear, not grief, but something older, something free. Morning didn't just come, it unfolded. Soft golden light crept over the ashes of what once was, warming the wooden beams of the broken cabin, the blood-streaked dirt, the haunted hearts still beating beneath worn-out shirts. I sat beside Clara, our backs against a split-log wall. The silence between us no longer heavy, but earned. Jonas stood at the edge of the bluff, looking out toward the vast stretch of desert beyond. Dust trailed in the air, not from danger, but from change. The canyon below, where Briggs had fallen, was now silent. The cliffside we collapsed had sealed the tunnel for good. And yet, I couldn't shake the echo of his last words. "You think the land forgets," he'd said. "But maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it just needs something new to remember." By noon, the people came. Not riders with guns drawn, but townsfolk. Dozens. Some we hadn't seen in weeks. Some who had hidden when the blood started flowing. They came on foot on wagons with children on hips and rifles strapped across their backs. I stood when I saw them brushing ash from my dress. My heart stuttered. Had they come to finish what the law couldn't? But it wasn't like that. A woman stepped forward, first an old widow named Ruthie, who once ran the boarding house. She held out a clay jar of preserves, trembling slightly. "We heard what y'all did. We're sorry we didn't help sooner," she said. "But we're here now." Clara took the jar and smiled, eyes shining. "Then let's start now." That afternoon, we laid Marshal Briggs to rest, not with honor, but with truth. His badge was buried beneath the cottonwood tree near the river where the town would later plant a garden. No one gave a speech, just silence. And then Clara placed a stone over the grave etched with one word, "end." The Apache women chose to stay, not as fugitives, but as founders. They repainted the chapel, built a new schoolhouse with their hands, and taught us words we never knew for things we always felt. Words for forgiveness, for rebirth. Jonas spent days rebuilding the fence line, but I knew it was less about keeping things out and more about knowing where we stood. He never asked for thanks, just kept hammering boards and watching the horizon like he was guarding not just our lives, but our hope. And then came the moment I won't forget. We were sitting around a fire under the starlit sky sharing stew and laughter. I had just finished a story about my mama and her tin-panned biscuits when Jonas leaned toward me. "You still dream of leaving?" he asked, voice low. I didn't answer right away. The flames crackled between us. I used to think I had to leave to become someone, I said. Now I think I became someone by staying. His hand brushed mine, gentle, uncertain, true. We named the town Esperanza, Spanish for hope. It was Clara's idea. She said it was the one thing we all shared no matter what language we prayed in. Millie became the town's first elected sheriff. She wore the star like it weighed nothing and everything all at once. Under her, we built not just fences and homes, but trust. Law came from listening, not just punishment. And me, I became something I never imagined. A writer, a midwife, a teacher, a woman who could shoot a rifle and hold a baby in the same day. My hands bore the marks of both. Jonas and I didn't rush into love. We let it grow like roots quietly, slowly beneath everything. One night, under the same cottonwood tree where the badge lay buried, he carved our initials into the bark. Not because we needed proof, but because love too deserves to be remembered. I still keep a journal. Every name, every loss, every laugh, because memory is a kind of justice. And some stories once told become shields for those still walking in darkness. So, if you find this, if you're reading these words long after the desert has claimed our bones, know this: the Wild West wasn't won by guns alone. It was shaped by hearts that broke and still chose to mend, by women who bled and still chose to birth something new, by people who stared down cruelty and chose community. My name is Loretta Mae Cartwright. Once I was a girl who believed love was something you waited for. Now I know sometimes you build it with your bare hands, and you let it burn brighter than fear ever could. Sometimes the greatest journey isn't across canyons or deserts, it's the one inward. Loretta's story wasn't just about a girl finding love or a town finding peace. It was about how healing often begins when we stop running and start tending, to our wounds, to others, to the land beneath our feet. We live in a world that celebrates escape, retire early, move somewhere else, start over. But some of the deepest transformations happen when we stay. When we choose to make meaning in the mess. When we forgive. When we rebuild. The Wild West was never just about guns and gold. It was about ordinary people making extraordinary choices, often in silence. Loretta Jonas. Clara? They didn't shout their strength. They lived it, quietly, boldly. So if you're listening now, maybe you're older, maybe you've known loss or loneliness, know this. It is never too late to be brave with your heart, to protect someone, to tell the truth, to stay and still become someone new. Because hope, like love, doesn't retire with age. It just grows deeper roots. You've just heard one powerful story, but many more remain untold. Click to discover more raw, gripping, deeply human tales from the Wild West.